Welcome to the Hive podcast, a new 10-part series with me, Nathalie Nahai, exploring technology's impact on our personal, cultural and political lives. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud and YouTube and join in the conversation with the hashtag HivePodcast. If you enjoy the show, please do give us a rating on iTunes as it helps spread the word and makes it easier for other people to also find this content. And now for the show. Silkie Carlo is the director of Big Brother Watch, a non-profit, non-party civil liberties and privacy campaigning organisation based in the UK. She was previously the senior advocacy officer at Liberty, where she led a programme on technology and human rights and launched a legal challenge to the Investigatory Powers Act. She previously worked for Edward Snowden's Official Defence Fund and Whistleblowers at Risk. Silkie is a passionate campaigner for the protection of liberties, particularly in the context of new and emerging technologies, and she's worked to uphold rights in the field of state surveillance, policing technologies, big data, artificial intelligence, and free expression online. She's also an information security trainer and organises crypto parties in London. This episode will be exploring everything from surveillance, privacy, and biometrics to human rights, the government, and how politics is shaping the ways in which technology can influence our lives. So Silkie, thank you very much for coming on the show with us today. Can you first of all tell us a little bit about Big Brother Watch, what you do, and why it's so important?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So Big Brother Watch is a privacy and civil liberties organisation that really campaigns on the forefront of technology and human rights issues. And we've seen since Big Brother Watch was established in 2009 that one of the ways that the state can most easily grow its power in the current time is by an expansion of the state surveillance architecture. And that growth in power has been absolutely unprecedented over the last 5 years in particular, since these kind of issues have come to light in the post-Snowden age. So we campaign to roll back the surveillance state, and we campaign for data rights and justice. We're looking at policing and technology and seeking to protect civil liberties wherever they come under risk. And we do that in a number of ways. We are quite proactive in Parliament. We have good parliamentary relationships. We do public campaigning and public education, and we litigate too. So we have one major legal challenge ongoing at the moment to the law under which the mass interception that Edward Snowden revealed was practiced.
And so before we sort of dive into some of the stuff that you're focusing on, because there's a huge amount of work that you're doing to try and secure people's rights from being eroded, which have already been significantly eroded. Can you maybe give some insights as to why, it seems to me at least, we're one of the worst countries in the EU for spying on our citizens, and how it's gotten this bad? How did we get into this situation?
Gosh, that's a great question, and such a difficult one to answer. I mean, it's an academic question, really. I mean, you could write a whole book about why does the UK have relatively such blasé attitudes towards privacy. I can't help thinking that it is because we don't have as readily as other countries like Germany that has really quite different attitudes towards privacy. We don't have as recent a history of such outrageously authoritarian government. And I do think that in the UK we've become a little bit complacent, and complacent not only to the kind of malintent that you can see the potential for in government, but also the banality of evil, if you like. The fact that it's so easy, especially with technological advancement, to erect this global mass surveillance architecture, apparently for the right reasons. We haven't been alive enough to the risks. And the terrible risk with that kind of attitude towards privacy that the UK has is that when we do wake up to the risks, it will be too late, which is why it's our job as Big Brother Watch to really be ringing the alarm now. As we're seeing, already we're nearing a point of no return, I would suggest.
I wonder if, when we're thinking about it, people often talk about it in terms of Orwellian versus Huxleyan kind of dystopias, where on the one hand with Orwell, it's very clear that people are being tracked with the screens in people's homes, recording pretty much everything they do. Whereas the other version that I think is probably more akin to what we have now is kind of surveillance through the guise of entertainment and utility. So, the fact that we've welcomed all of these technologies into our homes, not really having a sense of what, as you say, the sort of the surveillance architecture could do in the hands of companies and governments that can then use these technologies to collect data at a massive scale without consent in a covert way, and in a way that people are just farming out their own data willingly without even understanding what the potential ramifications might be. And this kind of touches on one of the areas that I would like to invite you to speak about, which is suspicionless surveillance. So issues connected with, for instance, the Snoopers Charter. Can you tell us a bit more about that and the work that you do in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, picking up on what you've said about, the difference between state surveillance and then the surveillance that we walk into in the practices that we use every day. I think the Orwell-Huxley comparison is absolutely perfect. I think Orwell said that the truth would be suppressed, and Huxley warned that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance.
Yeah.
And that's what, potentially we are kind of drowning. We are absolutely imbued with technological convenience that does ultimately, exploit the individual. It particularly exploits our privacy, and we are at real risk of a kind of Black Mirror society. And that's part of what our work against suspicionless surveillance is really driven by a very basic principle that no actor, no power should be able to surveil the individual unless there is suspicion of criminality, unless there is a real reason to do so. So we have a legal challenge against the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, which is the previous Snoopers Charter. And we're challenging the mass interception law. So there's a clause in that act which purportedly, I think we would disagree, but under which the government claimed it had the ability to intercept undersea cables that allow them to monitor billions of communications.
It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary, and the size of the data ingested and monitored seems almost unfathomable.
Yeah.
But when you look at some of the programs that were going on under that, so Optic Nerve, for example, was GCHQ's program whereby it passively intercepted webcam calls and took screenshots. And this was in 2008, that people were being spied on through their webcams, ironically, to train a facial recognition program.
Wow.
It just gets worse and worse. Yeah.
I also imagine they managed to get in a lot of pornography.
Yes. An estimated about 10% of those images were explicit. And it's just, the extent of invasion into people's private lives is absolutely extraordinary. And then there's a kind of, extremely Orwellian bulk monitoring programs that, like Karma Police, which was GCHQ's database of the browsing activities of all visible users on the internet.
It's just incredible.
So it really is. And, you can't, there's very little room to be hyperbolic about how extensive the state surveillance, suspicionless state surveillance framework really is. So we're challenging that.
The thing that frightens me quite a lot is the fact that there's just such a huge level of apathy. And I remember anyone related to tech and anyone connected with data analysis and marketing even back in the day, like maybe even 4 or 5 years ago, we all started hiding our webcams and making sure that if we didn't want to be recorded, our phones were off. But I mean, even that's not enough. So I had a friend that had like a pocket-based Faraday cage that you could put your phone into that would literally block all signals. You know, and I remember people saying to me, Nat, you're paranoid. And I was thinking, no, I'm just aware of how easy it is for this stuff to get used in ways that we wouldn't intend for them to be used. And of course, now everyone having seen the Facebook post of Zuckerberg being, actually it wasn't even a post, but the images of him covering his camera and microphones, and hearing a lot of people out of Silicon Valley saying, well, hang on, actually, there is the scope here for misuse, not just through data collection, but also social engineering. It feels as though there's a sea change. Do you think people are becoming less apathetic through this awareness, or do you think there's still an uphill battle to be had?
It's very difficult to gauge. I'm not sure how things are changing. I mean, particularly because now we have an almost adult population that has always had smart, internet-connected, soft surveillance technologies at their fingertips. So it's really hard to gauge how easily we'll be able to get through to that generation, because, you know, clearly they've grown up with norms that under, you know, any kind of rights respecting democracy are distinctly abnormal. But I do think that there are a lot of people, there really are a lot of people that care about this and that see that there's a problem. I think what we struggle with is that people are very disempowered, and there's a real kind of it's very, very off-putting to adopt views that you know you can't act on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, why would someone care deeply about their privacy and openly express views against state surveillance when they know that actually they can't do anything about it? And I think that's why groups like, you know, if I can say, I think that's why groups like Big Brother Watch are really important, because we do offer, you know, we will never stop. We'll never stop campaigning on these issues and support, you know, for us that we have from the public has enabled us to take the government to court. And that's what we'll, you know, probably keep doing.
I find it extraordinary that we have to take our own government to court.
I know.
It's especially because, well, being British in terms of place of birth, you want to believe that your own government is actually a force for positive, liberal progress in the world. And this is incredibly retrograde. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is the use by British police of automated facial recognition to identify and track people without their knowledge or consent. And it's this it connects to this idea of, you know, this passé idea almost of innocent until proven guilty. Is this something that's now a thing of the past? Is this kind of surveillance even legal?
Yeah, no, I think is the short answer. So this is I think the kind of new frontier for technologies, surveillance and rights is in some of the policing technologies that we can see are now being quite quietly rolled out. We've had fingerprint scanners recently being rolled out, all sorts, but automated facial recognition technology is perhaps the most insidious. So it's software that runs behind CCTV cameras that picks out faces from a crowd and seeks to alert police to the individuals that the police have said they want to look for. This technology is, this is essentially a biometric checkpoint. So yes. There are identity checkpoints that check who's in the public, who's walking around, who's entering a space. And there absolutely is this technology has never been considered by Parliament. I don't think the public is really aware that this is something that police forces are starting to use. So, for us, it's terribly worrying, not only from a rights perspective, that technologies can be used in this way in clear, I would suggest, quite a clear breach of basic rights and civil liberties, but also from a rule of law perspective, that the police have the ability, and in fact Home Office backing, to deploy an extraordinarily intrusive technology without a legal basis to do so.
How can they do it without a legal basis? What is it in terms of the structure of our legal system that enables them to operate seemingly outside of the law?
It's a good question, and I just don't know. There seems to be, particularly with technologies, there seems to be a temptation for government to run before it can walk, and I think they think it's exciting, and any technology seems innovative, and I really worry about how that bodes for the future. At what rate will we see robots deployed in the workplace and artificial intelligence used for decision making? And we have to take a measured approach to the use of technologies, and here clearly with facial recognition there has been no consideration of the kind of risks that the technology could pose. I mean, take, for example, at Remembrance Sunday in November 2017, the Metropolitan Police used automated facial recognition around the cenotaph where people were entering to pay their respects. And on this occasion, they were using the technology to identify people essentially with mental health issues.
What?
They're people that they call fixated individuals, so people that often, may send letters often to members of the royal family and so on. Not people that were wanted for arrest. So, clearly not people that had been harassing or stalking or anything like that. These people are known to have mental health issues. And the police were seeking to identify them using these biometric checkpoints, pull them out from the crowd and eject them from the event. They hadn't considered the impact that would have on someone that may already suffer from paranoia or, anxiety, to suddenly know they're being watched, not only watched by humans, but by being watched by very little known technology.
Wow.
And then being ejected from an event. So, yeah, we absolutely need to have a public debate about this. And I think, to be honest, the police just need to stop using it now.
But that's just extraordinary that they can get away with this. And also, the other thing that I find so profoundly disturbing about this is the way in which human society and all its fickleness and us all being components that make up human society, how quick we are to forget about the ways in which we've demonized things which are now seen as acceptable. So things like if you have an orientation that is not straight, if you are someone of a different ethnicity than white, if you are female as opposed to male, like all of these things. And of course, eventually the minorities get smaller and smaller, one hopes. And hopefully eventually everyone gets treated with the equal respect that we all deserve. But that people can identify or be identified by governments based on any of these characteristics and then demonized off the basis of that, almost with any kind of norm that's deemed to be appropriate at the time. So in this case, well, let's target people with quote unquote mental health issues. It just seems extraordinarily short-sighted and compassionateless, actually, to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, of course, in light of equality law and the right not to be subject to discrimination, I think there's significant legal questions around this too. But the way in which this has been practiced kind of thoughtlessly and with the veil of, Remembrance Sunday, it was for public safety. At Notting Hill Carnival, it was for law and order. But again, you see how conspicuous is it that in 2 years, from 2016 through 2017, the Metropolitan Police used automated facial recognition only twice. Both times were at Notting Hill Carnival. So the 2016 Carnival and then 2017 Carnival. And, there is little question in my mind that there is a community in London that the Metropolitan Police do over police, that they do target. And something about, the idea that technologies are neutral and data is neutral, that they can just construct these new watch lists and put them on facial recognition and there could never be anything racist about it. Well, in fact, I think even the choice to deploy at the event raises questions. But also we've seen that the algorithms, facial recognition algorithms themselves, have been known to carry racial biases and disproportionately misidentify black faces and female faces, which means that it could be, at Notting Hill Carnival, for instance, black people who are asked to prove their identity because they've been flagged by their system more often than white people. It's just absolutely unacceptable and really disappointing that when we put this to the police, they said they didn't see this as being an issue.
It's crazy. And I think the thing that's so upsetting about this is the lack of depth of consideration of the ways in which we currently are marginalizing people in society. Because I think if we want a better society, we have to really look in the mirror and think, what are the things that we all do to contribute to a society that we don't want to live in, to biases of all kinds? Because as you say, I think when we create these technologies, our biases go into the creation of these technologies. We can't help it because it's the way that we are. But what we can do is admit it and then seek to find ways to rectify that. And I think this blind kind of denial of the ways in which we shape our world, sort of in the name of quote unquote progress, it's quite disheartening. Do you think it's possible that we could end up in a future not too far from now where we're emulating some kind of social credit system, the kind of which is being rolled out in China, where they score citizens based on traits such as their trustworthiness, and if they commit so-called unsocial acts like even stepping out onto a pavement when the light is red, they get their face put up onto a billboard. I mean, this is one of the ideas of things that's been rolled out. Is it possible that we could just sleepwalk into that kind of future?
Gosh, I really, really hope not, of course.
Sorry to ask.
No, I mean, it's odd because it's a legitimate question, I think. But, obviously, as usual, I think the way that these things roll out in the UK is a bit softer, but it doesn't mean that we could witness a similar kind of effect. What is the kind of deleterious effect of that kind of system? It is a chilling of free speech, a chilling of free expression, a chilling of free association. And I worry that in many different ways, the kind of direction that this government is taking the country similarly has that kind of effect. I mean, we certainly worry that the mass surveillance system makes people start to question what they're saying, or, now we're seeing more policing of social media networks. Or should I post this? Should I like this? Should I follow that person? Should I like this post or whatever? We underlying the way that social media networks are constructed is a kind of de facto credit system, if you like, and the ability to grow and lose social capital on these platforms. So I do worry about how that's kind of being it's a system that risks being built before our eyes. I think more importantly than ever, I think, as you were suggesting, we all have a responsibility to be conscious about this new technological realm that we are building and that is being built around us, and to cherish and reinscribe the values that we care about most.
So in terms of things that we can do, which I want to move on to in a second, where are we at currently with regards to the regulation of the Investigatory Powers Act? Like, what, in terms of the progress or lack of progress that's being made there, what's something that people need to be made aware about?
So we had a hearing at the European Court of Human Rights just at the end of last year, which went really well. And I am confident that we will have a good result, but we'll have to see.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, and toes. So we'll find out, I expect, in the next 2 or 3 months or so. And so, hopefully, if people are interested in this topic, if they follow Big Brother Watch on Twitter or sign up to our newsletters, follow our work, we will be, of course, letting everyone know what happens with that legal challenge. And that will play into the new Snoopers Charter, the Investigatory Powers Act, because if we can show at the highest European court that the principle of mass interception is an unacceptable interference with important democratic rights to privacy, then that will be a significant dent in the new piece of legislation as well. So that's really exciting.
I'm so heartened to hear that. The second thought that comes directly into mind as soon as I hear that good piece of news is, what happens if, I'm still holding out hope, but if and when Brexit ends up going through, to which court of law will the British government be able to be held to account?
Yeah.
Does it change anything?
I think, well, different groups have brought challenges to the European Court of Justice, which obviously is closely linked in with the EU, and to the European Court of Human Rights, which relates to our Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing from our perspective is to make sure that we never allow our government to roll back our Human Rights Act or to untether us from the European Convention on Human Rights, because that is separate to membership of the European Union and the political union. It's something that this government has made quite clear in the past that it wants to do, but we should be deeply suspicious of any attempts to do that, because then we really, really, really would be, rudderless, I think, in terms of upholding rights in the UK.
Mm. So what's your greatest concern for the future if the current situation goes unchecked?
My greatest concern, I'm deeply concerned, to be honest with you, I'm deeply concerned about our future. And I think on surveillance in particular, if we don't resist suspicionless surveillance attempts by current governments, whether that is in the form of mass surveillance by the security and intelligence agencies, or whether it's technologies like automated facial recognition on our streets. These are future concerns, but they're present concerns because they're happening now. So if these technologies are allowed to continue and to be rolled out, then I would argue that we will no longer be a free society. We will be a significantly controlled, monitored, watched, quantified, tracked society, and it will not only limit our freedom in the physical sense and in the way that we engage with the state, but internally in each of us, what it means to be a human, what it feels like to be free, will be damaged if we don't protect privacy today. Then we won't have that aspect of our humanity for future generations.
And it's a hard aspect. Well, it's an aspect that I think has been a hard one, that we forget that people have lost their lives for and bled for and fought for, just so that we could have the privilege of, not having to think about it even. It kind of reminds me of the panopticon, which was this idea that was conceived by a British chap called Jeremy Bentham. And the idea is that you have a physical structure in which you have a surveillance tower, a watchtower in the centre of this structure. And the tower is so high and it overlooks circular structure of cells, so they can overlook any cell. But it's so high that you can't actually see from the cells whether a guard is there or not. And so it creates a sense of inner self-surveillance. And I think that's kind of what we're walking into. But I don't want to be too doom and gloom. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you two more questions. The first of which is, what is your greatest hope for the future?
I don't often get to think about hopes. I'm always thinking about the risks and the worries.
Got to have hope.
Got to have hope, haven't we? I really hope that the action that we're seeing being taken now is representative of some kind of tension point and a teething issue that society had getting to grips with new technologies. I hope that we can look back in 10, 15 years and say, gosh, do you remember when all of those technologies were rolled out and we had to spend 5 years taking the government to court? And now we live in, yes, a technologically advanced, but a freer, happier, more creative society. I really, really hope that that's the case. But we need, really, we can only do that with public support, and that's how we did our current legal challenge. So fingers crossed.
I really, really hope with you that that's what we're walking into. So if you could give people one action that they can take today, right now, that we can take to fight for this future, what would it be?
That's really difficult. One thing.
Or you can have a few.
Yeah, a whole list, a prescription of things. Well, I would say actually, if there were just one thing, it might be just to download the Signal app on your phone. Because it's a great app that allows, it's totally free, and free as in free of cost, and it's free software. It enables people to send messages to each other without being spied on. More so than WhatsApp. Signal doesn't collect metadata as well, so it doesn't collect logs of how often you talk to your family, partner, friends, whatever. It's the most private piece of daily usable software that's out there, and I think it's by taking action and starting to reclaim privacy in our everyday life that we can cling on to the importance of privacy. So that would be probably my most important thing. But I think, there are other things. We train people in how and why to use Signal, email encryption, a whole range of privacy technologies at our monthly crypto parties.
Brilliant.
In London. And of course, I would say follow Big Brother Watch's work and support us because, we're cheerleaders for privacy in the digital age. And we really rely on public support to do our important work.
And actually, I've been supporting you guys for quite a while, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. If you are listening and you want to follow Big Brother Watch, I'm going to put, of course, all of the links to their resources and social media channels on the show notes. But you can follow Big Brother Watch at BBW1984 on Twitter. The website is bigbrotherwatch.org.uk. You can also check out the handbook that Silkie wrote if you are a journalist, on information security for journalists. And of course, you can follow Silkie at Silkie Carlo on Twitter. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Silkie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. And thanks to your listeners as well. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Hive podcast with me, Nathalie Nahai. To find out more about today's guest and the topics we explored, you can find resources and links on the show notes page at natalienahai.com/The Hive podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please do give us a rating on iTunes and join in the conversation with the hashtag HivePodcast. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the next episode.